Hi everybody, welcome to my homestead and welcome to my channel. My name is Jared. In this video, we're going to be talking about this star because I believe there are 4 different signs that are associated with this star. One that happened a long time ago, 2 that happened within the last few years, and then at the time of this recording, one that's going to happen next month. This is a very interesting star. The name of the star is Betelgeuse, and yes, it is pronounced Beetlejuice according to Merriam-Webster and other sources. And you may recognize this star as part of the Orion constellation. Here's Orion's belt in the middle, these 3 stars, and then the star that we're talking about is the top left one. That's this orangish reddish color. Here's another depiction of it that's maybe a little bit more clear. Okay, here it is right here, Beetlejuice. And then there's this depiction where you can see what it's supposed to portray. Some people equate this constellation with Christ because it's a man and it's facing us. And this star in particular would be the right shoulder. Okay. So let's go through it. Let's go through the 4 different things. Let's start with the Wikipedia article. It says Betelgeuse is a red supergiant star of spectral type M1-2 and one of the largest visible to the naked eye. It is usually the 10th brightest star in the night sky. Keep that in mind. Okay, the 10th brightest normally. And after Rigel, the 2nd brightest in the constellation of Orion. Rigel is this star like on the opposite side, the bottom left, or the bottom right, I mean. It is a distinctly reddish, semi-regular, variable star. Okay, so let's talk about this first sign. This is from space.com. Discovery suggests red supergiant Betelgeuse was actually yellow 2,000 years ago. Now, what happened 2,000 years ago? Christ came to Earth 2,000 years ago. He came, he was born, performed his mortal ministry and the atonement, and was resurrected. So this change in this really prominent star took place at the same time, or roughly the same time, as when Christ came to Earth. Let's read some of the details. Using historical depictions and descriptions of Betelgeuse throughout the ages, scientists have been able to pinpoint roughly when the supergiant star got its red coloration. The team found that the star, located in the Orion constellation in the Milky Way, around 640 light years from Earth, changed from a yellow-orange color to red approximately 2,000 years ago. Now, I'm sure I know what most of you are thinking. When we think about Christ and when we think about the color red, we associate it with his atonement. When he was crucified, when he paid for the sins of the world, right? So it's a very interesting thing to happen with this star, that it would change color at about the same time that took place. All right, let's continue. Stars more massive than the sun, like Betelgeuse, which has 11 times the mass of our sun, but is at least 764 times its size, tend to be blue, white, or red. But as they change from hot young blue stars to cooler and older red giants, they pass through a short yellow-orange phase. Okay, so with these types of stars, they go from a bluish color to yellow-orange to red. All right, continuing. By studying historical documents, the researchers found that Betelgeuse went through this phase 2 millennia ago. The findings could help researchers better understand the life cycle of stars. One of the sources used by the team was Chinese court astronomer Sima Qian, who wrote about star colors in 100 BC, commenting, quote, "White is like Sirius, red like Antares, yellow like Betelgeuse, blue like Bellatrix," end quote. New quote. From these specifications, one can conclude that Betelgeuse at that time was in color between blue-white Sirius and Bellatrix and the red Antares or Antares. University of Jena astrophysicist Ralph Neuhauser, who was on the team behind the discovery, said in a statement. Okay, so 100 BC, it is somewhere between Sirius, which is white, and Bellatrix, which is blue. Okay, 100 years before Christ. Moving forward 100 years in history, Hyginus, a Roman scholar, wrote that Betelgeuse was similar in color to Saturn, suggesting that at that time the star had a yellow-orange hue. The 14th century astronomer Ptolemy compared Betelgeuse to other stars, distinguishing it from red-colored bright stars like Antares, a red supergiant around 700 times the size of the Sun, whose very name in Greek means like Mars, or Aldebaran. Quote, from a statement by Danish astronomer Tycho Brahe, one can conclude that in the 16th century, Betelgeuse was more red than Aldebaran, Neuhauser added. In the modern day, astronomers see Betelgeuse as being similar in brightness and color to Antares, found in the constellation of Taurus and located around 604 light years from Earth. Okay, so they have historical evidence, they have documentation of how the ancients viewed Betelgeuse and its color. And it changed color. And it was around 2,000 years ago. And Christ was around 2,000 years ago. So it's very interesting. Okay, now we're going to move forward to recent times because there's something really interesting that happened recently. Okay, this is from a paper, an abstract on nature.com. The name of the article is A Dusty Veil Shading Betelgeuse During Its Great Dimming. And I just want to read this part right here. From November 2019 to March 2020, Betelgeuse, the second closest red supergiant to Earth, experienced a historic dimming of its visible brightness. Usually having an apparent magnitude between 0.1 and 1.0, its visual brightness decreased to 1.614 magnitudes around 7 to 13 February 2020, an event referred to as Betelgeuse's Great Dimming. According to this article from space.com, what that equated to was this. In late 2019, the star Betelgeuse dimmed by about 60%. So there was this sudden dimming that took place of Betelgeuse. So there's been these different theories as to why it happened, and they feel more confident about it now. I'm not going to go into why it happened because we're just going to focus on the fact that it did happen. And what I'm interested in is when it happened. So if we go to my Second Coming timeline, where I'm trying to keep track of significant events, you can see that it started in November of 2019, which was just 1 month before the COVID-19 pandemic started. That's according to this. If you go to Fox 17 West Michigan, there's other places you can find this, but I'm just using this one as my source. On December 12th, 2019, a cluster of patients in Wuhan, China, began experiencing strange respiratory symptoms, leaving medical professionals puzzled as to what it could be. We now know they were the first patients with COVID-19. So this began December 12th, 2019. All right. And the dimming started, I don't have an exact date. I'm just going off of what we read in the abstract, but it happened the month before. And so if you look at column F, this is where I track, so you can kind of visualize how long it went. Here's the great dimming, this purple column right here. And when did it end? It ended in March of 2020. What happened in March? Well, there's a couple things that happened in March. First, on the 18th, we had this take place at the Salt Lake Temple. there was an earthquake in Magna, Utah, which caused the trumpet of the angel Moroni on top of the Salt Lake Temple to fall, and he lost his trumpet. This was on March 18th, 2020. Okay, so symbolically speaking, when you're looking at that, it's a symbol of an angel going quiet. And what happened? 2 days later, the missionaries got called home from their missions. Not only that, but a few days after that, starting on March 26th, so just a few days later, the First Presidency closed all temples worldwide. And here's the First Presidency message that gives all the details to that. So both of these things, both the missionaries coming home and missionary work changing for a while and temples closing worldwide, were a result of the pandemic. And at this same time, you have the great dimming of Betelgeuse, which in itself, it's not too hard to picture that being a sign of things going quiet. You have a star that is normally, shining bright, and for a period of time, it's darkened. And the time in which it's darkened is from the beginning of the pandemic until the month where missionary work almost came to a halt and temple work completely ceased for a while. It's very strange. Okay, so we have the color change 2,000 years ago at the time of Christ. We have the great dimming that took place, seemingly going along with the pandemic and the work of salvation kind of coming to a standstill. All right. And then the third event, or the third sign, happened this year in April 2023. So let's read about that. We're going to read this article, or part of this article by The Guardian. It's new territory. Why is Beetlejuice glowing so brightly and behaving so strangely? So we just got done talking about it going through this great dimming, and now it's shining really bright. Okay, it says, one of the brightest stars in the sky is behaving strangely, pulsating from bright to dim twice as fast as usual, and giving scientists an unprecedented insight into how stars die. Betelgeuse, the closest red supergiant to Earth, has long been understood to move between brighter and dimmer in 400-day cycles. But from late 2019 to early 2020, it underwent what astrophysicists called the Great Dimming, as a dust cloud obscured our view of the star. Now, from what I've seen, there's been a couple other theories, but anyway, now it is glowing at 150% of its normal brightness, and is cycling between brighter and dimmer at 200-day intervals, twice as fast as usual, according to astrophysicist Andrea Dupree of the Harvard-Smithsonian Center for Astrophysics. It is currently the 7th brightest star in the night sky, up 3 places from its usual 10th brightness. Okay, so there's a lot of things going on here. Okay, there's a lot of things going on here, a lot of things to think about. Okay, so it went through the great dimming, and now, for some reason, this year, it's at 150% its normal brightness, and its brighter and dimmer cycling is going twice as fast. So, for those that have eyes to see, ears to hear, and to think of these things in a symbolic way, it's not hard to view that as potentially being a sign or a symbol of hastening of the work. Now missionary work is getting back on track. In fact, this year, 2023, they met their goal of having over 72,000 missionaries. And this was as a result of last year and President Nelson calling for the youth to serve missions in the April 2022 General Conference. And they're crediting his call for this surge in missionary work that's taking place right now. And then we have these two numbers right here, 7 and 10, We've talked about numbers and their symbolism, how both 7 and 10 are viewed as numbers of perfection and completion. 7 in the sense of the creation of the earth, and 10 in the mathematical sense. We've looked at how in Judaism they view it as the number that completes a set. When you count from 1 to 10, that completes a set. So 7 in the sense of creation, 10 mathematically. So for it to go from the 10th brightest to the 7th brightest is really interesting. When we think about the history of this earth, it's divided into 7,000-year periods. And the 7th is the millennium, and we're about to enter into the millennium. So it's almost as though symbolically this represents a hastening of the work and how we're about to enter into the millennium. So it's really exciting. Okay, let's move on. Quote, one of the coolest things about Beetlejuice is that we're watching the final stages of a big star evolution play out almost in real time for us, which we've never really been able to study in this much depth before, says Dr. Sarah Webb, an astrophysicist at Swinburne University of Technology in Australia. So it's interesting that, scientists are looking at Betelgeuse. They're expecting it to go supernova, come to the end of its life. They're calling it the final stages. And there's just that interesting parallel too. We're essentially talking about the end, in the spiritual sense. If we're interpreting these signs correctly, it's the end of this 6,000-year period and going into the millennium. And then scientists, I don't know that Betelgeuse will go supernova or what's going to happen, but they're thinking of it in the sense of it being in its final days, the last days of Betelgeuse. So I think that's kind of interesting. There are records from ancient Egypt of what appears to be a star exploding as a supernova. The Egyptians described the appearance as a quote-unquote second sun in the sky, says Webb. So it's just interesting. If it does go supernova, this may be what to expect. I don't know that will happen, but I just thought I would share this with you. The paper Dupree co-authored with other scientists from Harvard and the University of California, Berkeley, concludes that it will be 5 to 10 years before Betelgeuse returns to its normal 400-day cycles. Quote, since the dimming, Betelgeuse's light and radial velocity curves have been markedly different from its past. It's new territory, says Webb. We haven't seen this before. So it's all really interesting. In this article from Futurism, it talks about the fact that this brightening that took place happened in April. And that's what I have here on my Second Coming timeline. And I think that even that is significant because what happened in April? That's when we had the General Conference where there was a lot of focus on Palm Sunday. And it seems to me that Palm Sunday was a foreshadowing or a parallel event to the Second Coming, because this is when in his mortal ministry, he was recognized as Messiah and King. And then at the Second Coming, he's obviously going to be recognized as Messiah and King. So what happened was in April, there was all this talk about Palm Sunday, something that I'd never seen in my lifetime. It was so unusual that I decided to put Palm Sunday on my phrase tracker right here. This is where I tally up the number of General Conference talks that use these words and phrases per year. And you can see for Palm Sunday, it was 9 times for 2023. And when you go back in the past, it doesn't come up very often at all. So there was a big emphasis for some reason on Palm Sunday in that year. There had been other general conferences that had fallen on Palm Sunday in the past. This isn't the first time that it's happened, but there was a big emphasis on Palm Sunday. I tend to think that this is the reason why, is because Christ is about to return. And we remember what happened on Palm Sunday and what happened during that week and how he was going to return in the last days. And interestingly, what they chose for that General Conference was the Palm Sunday imagery. And then for this General Conference, the October 2023 General Conference, the imagery that they chose was this depiction of the Second Coming. You can see it here on the church website under conferences. You can also see it when you go to the Liahona covers. We'd already talked about the fact that for 2023, every single cover featured Christ. And that has not always been the case. But in 2023, yes, every single cover, there's some artwork depicting Christ during different points, during his ministry. So you have the May 2023 Liahona, which has all the General Conference talks, and on the cover you see Christ and Palm Sunday. And then for the November 2023, which covers the October 2023 General Conference, you have that Second Coming imagery. So it's really interesting. It's interesting that in April, as we're thinking about Palm Sunday, in Christ's triumphal entry into Jerusalem and being recognized as king, that you have this going on with Betelgeuse. It brightens to 150% its regular brightness and becomes the 7th brightest star in the sky. Okay, lastly, I just came across this as I was preparing this video. Okay, this is on Universe Today, and this is something that's going to be happening with Betelgeuse. Okay, in Asteroid will occult Betelgeuse on December 12th. I cannot for the life of me remember when it was or what it was, but a fair few years ago, I remember positioning a telescope to observe an asteroid as it silently and perhaps slightly eerily drifted between us and the moon. I say eerily as this asteroid had the ability to cause widespread damage had it hit, but of course we knew it posed no threat. I remember at the time thinking it was mind-blowing that even today we still use mathematics with roots, pardon the pun, centuries old to calculate the position of objects in our solar system. We get to see evidence of this again on the 12th of December when something rare happens. Now this is interesting because remember, it was the 12th of December that we had the first documented cases of COVID in 2019. We're now 4 years after that. I don't know that there's any significance, but it's kind of odd. I don't know. I have rather hinted to what I am referring on the 12th of December. Asteroid 319 Leona will pass directly in front of Betelgeuse. The red giant in the constellation of Orion, whose name amusingly translates to armpit of the giant. Well, I've seen different translations. Other translations is shoulder of the giant, but this person's going for the humor. Now there's a fact to amuse and astound your friends. To be able to calculate that a rock approximately 60 kilometers across is going to pass directly in front of a star that is just over 650 light years away is really quite staggering. Perhaps more excitingly, if you live along a corridor from Central Asia in Southern Europe to Florida and Mexico, then at around 1:17 UTC, you have a chance, clouds permitting, to see it for yourself, and you don't need any telescope or equipment, just your eyes. So that's really interesting. An event like this is quite rare, where the light from a bright star is blocked or occulted by an asteroid, happening every few decades at most. So something rare is about to happen, and out of all stars, it's going to be Betelgeuse, where it's going to be almost like an eclipse, but instead of the moon or something, it's an asteroid that's going to block out Betelgeuse, and you can see it with the naked eye. I checked when this was happening on hebcal.com, the Hebrew calendar. It's actually going to happen during Hanukkah on the day of 6 candles. That's kind of interesting just because a lot of times 6 is associated with man, whereas like 7 is perfection, man is short of perfection. And so it's interesting that it would happen on that day, on Hanukkah. I don't know if that necessarily means anything, but that's interesting. And then I had just one more thing. This is from iflscience.com. Next month, an asteroid will hide Betelgeuse and might reveal its secrets. So here's, I guess, the best place, or maybe the only places you can see Betelgeuse get blocked out by this asteroid. I guess similar to an eclipse with the path of totality, where you get the full effect. So here's the line right here. And in this, another interesting detail, it says that the occultation will be 17 minutes. And we've talked about 17 a lot on the channel, simply because it's made up of 7 and 10, both numbers of perfection and completion. So just another little detail about this. It's already something that's rare. It's happening with this star, which has been doing a lot of interesting things. And out of all stars, it's happening to this one. So that's what I have for you. Betelgeuse is a really interesting star. We have those 4 potential signs. One is that its color changed around the time of Christ. Number 2, there was the great dimming that took place as the pandemic was beginning and then ending when the church closed the temples and missionaries were called home. The third one was how it brightened in April of this year, 150%, and its brighter to dimmer cycle increased, or it doubled. And then this thing that's going to happen on the 12th of December, where there's going to be this occultation or dimming by the asteroid, and it'll be dimmed for 17 minutes. All right, well, that's going to be it for this one. So if you haven't already, please make sure to subscribe, like this video if you liked it, leave your thoughts and opinions down in the comments below. Also, make sure to share it, and I'll talk to you guys later.